never slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love.
What is up there, caller? How you doing?
Hi, good. Yeah, my name's Nate. You can say him.
Okay. Nate.
For pronouns if you like. Yeah, so getting back to the actual subject of the stream here. So I was looking at a discussion that MythVision, what's his name, Kyle or something?
Kyle.
Having
Derek?
Richard Miller. Derek.
Derek.
Yeah, Derek and Richard Miller were on for an hour talking about, how they thought there was this guy, is how they said.
Right.
And they spent the hour talking about how, like, Richard respects that there are people who don't think there was this guy, but they spent the whole hour and they never actually suggested any concrete reason why they thought there was this guy.
Right.
And, we all agree that the TF and Josephus in general don't give us any reason. And Paul's talking about Adelphos doesn't give us any reason. And none of the second century hearsay business from like Pliny and Tacitus and whoever else don't give us any reason.
Right.
And so the question is, have you ever heard them actually offer any legitimate reason to believe that that there was this guy? Is it just personal preference?
Yeah, I've actually got a video on my channel, and I'm going to try to find it right now. Well, I did a live stream with Derek where we talked about and discussed what he considers to be good evidence for the historical Jesus. Let me see if I can get it real quick. But in essence, what Derek, and I'm not sure about Tim Miller, I haven't talked to him yet about it, but generally, I guess some of the more reasonable historicists out there, they usually bank on Paul's work, and then they will usually bank on Paul's work, and then the sources behind the Gospels is generally what I've heard from people. And I don't know if you know what I'm talking about with that.
Tim Miller, at least, and Derek seem to acknowledge that the Gospels and Acts are like wholly fictional.
Right.
So that doesn't give me anything to stand on. So it's like I haven't actually heard of any actual legitimate reason for them to stick to this position, as opposed to saying, well, there's at best there's no reason to think one way or the other.
Right.
And
well, I mean, where do you land on it?
Well, I think it didn't exist, because if he had existed, somebody would have, feel like First Clements would have been citing things he said, and Paul would have been citing things he said, maybe.
Right.
Like First Peter would have mentioned something about him, but the fact that there's just so. Nobody seems at all interested in anything he actually said while he was alive until at least 45 years later. And actually, I don't know why people think that the religion was started in the 30s and not like about the time that Paul and Peter started writing.
Okay, sorry, you were cutting out with that. I didn't catch that last bit. Can you repeat yourself?
But I said Sorry, I probably should get somewhere where there's better reception here. Yeah, I don't know why people try to pin the beginning to like 30 or the early 30s.
Right.
Are they just like trying to provide enough time for there to be churches for Paul to have been writing letters to?
Well, no. So they generally put Jesus in the 30 to 33 time frame for a few reasons. Mainly that has to do with Passover, because typically those datings rely on like what the Gospels say about Jesus's crucifixion, and so he was either killed in 30 or 33 is generally when they place it, but that's because of when the Passover occurs and how the Gospels describe that. And so,
but if we don't assume existed, then do we have any? And we don't count the Gospels. Then is there any objective reason to prefer putting him in the 30s and not like,
well, no,
sometime later?
Yeah,
or not him, but beginnings of the church.
Right.
Of course,
so,
the church. There are things we know, and one of the things we know is that there really was a church, or a Jesus cult, right?
Right.
And we know that it started at some point, and that we think Peter and Paul were involved in starting it.
Right.
Or maybe that Paul wasn't. Paul claims not to have been involved in starting it, but we don't know that he's telling the truth.
Well, I mean, we don't know, but I would say that the church that eventually was built, like the community of Christians that eventually was built, was definitely molded by Paul. So, I mean, whatever form it took before Paul had his hand in it, I think it was effectively changed after Paul got involved. So that's how I feel about that. As far as like nailing down like when Jesus was crucified, like if we were to assume that he was, typically, with these kinds of things, you hear ranges of dates. And so obviously, with Paul writing in 49, there's no way that Jesus could have been crucified after that. And, Paul claimed to have been, already like persecuting Christians and everything like that, and then turned Christian a long time before he wrote anything down. And so typically they date it in the first 30 years or so. Historians would probably place it like sometime in the early first century, prior to like 30 or 35 or something like that you would find a date range. But incidentally, there's nothing that would actually solidify that Jesus, died in the first century CE. There's actually a record in the Talmud about a Jesus that sounds somewhat similar to the Jesus of the New Testament, but it's a completely different story. It's just like there was a Jesus that was killed for, doing some kind of sorcery stuff, and his followers were killed and all this other stuff. But all of the details of that are completely different. And it happened like in 80 something BCE under King Janaeus. So obviously it's not, there's nothing that says, oh, it has to be in this time frame. I think that it could have happened like in any amount of time, like first century BCE to first century CE. And there definitely were Jewish groups out there that had predictions for when the Messiah would come. And so they were definitely like in that time frame, they were looking for somebody to come and proclaim to be the Messiah. So there was already this expectation that this Messiah would be coming.
Yeah. Okay. So going back to the question of like, when people think that there was, or that people think that there was a guy, is like, is there actually anything that they have to work with? I'm not hearing that there's anything but personal preference.
Yeah,
That's what you know about.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so the best that I've heard as far as like, and I would put Derek from MythVision in this camp of using what I think is the most contested but best evidence that you have for a historical Jesus, and that's the references in Paul, and then whatever sources that could have existed prior to the Gospels. Now, these are hypothetical sources, so that we can't scrutinize them and really know anything about them. But I mean, that's going to be one of your best pieces of evidence, like if those were to exist. But the fact that we don't have them and all we can do is hypothesize that they did exist, I feel like that's a pretty bad reflection on the evidence that we have for a historical Jesus.
Yeah, well, that kind of relying on evidence that doesn't exist strikes me as special pleading. It's like, okay, let's invent some evidence and then rely on that evidence.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
not how you would argue anything else.
Well, and every like, so how Bart Ehrman will argue for it is that he invents a Q document, which is a document that precedes Mark or alongside Mark. And then he also posits a M document, or M source is what he says, because it's probably oral sources and written source. Then there's L source, and then there's the multiple sources that inform the Gospel of John. And then apparently there's also like some near eyewitness sources that inform like Ignatius and Clement and Hebrews or something like that. But I find that hypothesizing sources to make your conclusions work for you, for like your to make your conclusions work in general, I feel like that's a pretty bad methodology in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean it's completely bogus, and nobody allows that kind of reasoning anywhere else.
Yeah.
So you like, if you invent oral traditions or invent a Q source or what have you, you're just saying, well, I don't have anything to rely on, and I'm really clutching at straws.
I feel like they're clutching at straws. So.
Yeah, it's really clutching at straws to hypothesize a document that would be evidence if it existed.
Mm-hmm.
And we just don't allow that kind of reasoning anywhere else.
Well, just add a little bit of context. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I wanted to ask Derek and
Tim.
Richard Miller.
Oh, Richard Miller. Sorry, not Tim Miller. Richard Miller.
Richard Miller. Yeah, but the stream was already over, and I was like, well, you keep up on these things. So if you had heard of anything that they, if there was anything else, you would probably know about it. Yeah, and you'd be able to tell me.
If you want to hear Derek's case, the case that he makes for a historical Jesus, like why he's convinced of it, I did put a link in the chat just now that you can hit up, and it's an interview that I did with Derek about it. So if you've got like an hour or so to kill, you can listen to that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, have you got any other callers waiting for it?
Yeah, I've got one more caller.
I'll let you get onto that caller then.
Okay, and hey, I'm planning on doing this a little bit more often, so I hope that you can call in again.
I will. Thanks.
All right. See you later, man.
Later. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness.